Welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily with Kyle Elfrink and Ray Flowers, Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to use the promo code FSD20 for a 20% discount on the products over at fantasyguru.com.
Wish us luck on this Wednesday. We'll see how things go. Kyle Elfrink, Ray Flowers with you. It is Fantasy Sports Daily. I say wish us luck because Ray, as everybody goes through and deals with and has to challenge themselves with, computer issues this morning. So fingers crossed on my end that we can stay upright here.
Yeah, it's amazing what we can do. We've always talked about it. You're in St. Louis. I'm in California. We used to, do shows with producers that were in DC with the show coming out of New York. Like, it's amazing how all this works. But at the same time, it's amazing how often it doesn't work. And it's so frustrating. Raise your hand, right? Like, how this happens like once a week to everyone. Like, your phone, your car, something just doesn't work. And it's so frustrating.
Am I loud? Am I quiet? Are you hearing me? I see Sal in the room is like, hey, your volume, Kyle.
Yeah, when you raise your voice, it doesn't clip, but it gets. Okay. So maybe you want to be a little monotone today, Kyle.
I'll be monotone, Kyle, for the next hour or so. What do we got for you today? Well, let's show you what we have for you today. We got a lot of football. Yes, we are still in the thick of football. Don't worry about that. Getting you set for the playoffs. A lot of news coming out of there. So we'll give you the latest injury news. We are going to talk playoff formats. Fantasy football. Tomorrow and Friday, we'll kind of get into specifics for who we like, maybe DFS, that kind of stuff. But today, we will lay out some formats that you might be interested in playing. And I think, Ray, there is a column. I think I saw it yesterday. Russell Clay posted a column with his thoughts on a variety of playoff formats, too.
Yeah, and I think Tyler Beaker's got an FFPC one up as well. So, Yeah, there's a couple options there. We're kind of trying to cover some of the main ones. I know people ask which service to use and stuff. We can dive into that. But you and I have always enjoyed doing the playoff format. And I hope everyone out there listening is playing DFS, playing a playoff tournament, something to keep it going here in fantasy football.
Yeah, it does keep the excitement going into January. So good times to talk about there. Also, some more news and notes. Mike Vrabel is out in Tennessee. So we'll talk about the Titans. And my goodness, where do they go from here? It could be a very, very interesting offseason for a team like the Tennessee Titans. So we will hit on that. And, of course, we will continue our positional recap of all things quarterbacks. Yesterday, we hit on the hits. Today, we'll go on the opposite, the disappointments. I will note, Ray, a guy who was top 12 yesterday, a hit, is also going to land in our disappointments, Patrick Mahomes. So I don't know if that's fair, Ray, but I'm going to call him a disappointment this year.
Yeah, it's really interesting how you can be both, right? Like you tend to think it's very binary. It's A or B, it's light or dark, it's good or bad. But sometimes it's falling in the cracks there in the middle. And Mahomes kind of had one of those seasons. You're right.
Yep, we'll see some other quarterbacks, too, who didn't finish top 12, and they were healthy. That's the other thing. We're not going to pick on guys who got injured. We'll stay away from that. And we promised this yesterday. We didn't get to it. We'll get to it today. MLB Check-in. And we actually had another signing yesterday. The Cubs finally got involved. So we'll take a look at some of the news in the last 4 or 5 days over the weekend that has broken. Because, of course, we are getting set for Major League Baseball. Ray Flowers himself is getting set for Major League Baseball. Of course, Ray, as we get set for baseball, we also get set for deals. We still got deals over at Fantasy Guru, right?
We do, absolutely. The promo code FSD20 is good for 20% discount again, as we say every day here on the show. It's our running one, FSD20. Anything. You can buy hats, T-shirts. You can buy the football product, the baseball product, the hockey, the racing, the soccer. Any of it, use that promo code FSD20. We've also got the DFS deal in place right now. So if you want to join us and play DFS, you've dabbled a little bit, but you've never really gotten involved with us directly with DFS, you can sign up now all the way through the Super Bowl. We got a package there for that. And then we've got our all-in rest of the season football package as well. And this is the newer one that just debuted this week. And basically what it gets you is all the coverage, right? The rest of the season this year through the Super Bowl. But it goes beyond that because you also get the Super Bowl betting guide to help you with your wagering as you're sitting around eating nachos and wings. You can place some bets to win there too. We also have the offseason franchise mode, which is part of that, which basically gets you us covering free agency, us covering the draft with player profiles and all that kind of stuff. So you can sign up right now for the all-in package for the NFL, and it'll basically get you covered through the draft.
Very good. Love to hear all those deals. I also love to see Ray's background. I've kind of been dealing with a variety of things right now, but I just noticed what Ray has behind him. The beautiful Buena Vista in downtown San Francisco. A true landmark to visit if you're ever hanging out down there.
Yeah, it is. It's great. It's where they basically invented the Irish coffee. And it's right there at the end of the cable car line. It's right there. You look out the front window of the restaurant and you can see the bay. Beautiful location, great spot. And they actually have interacted with me on social media. They follow me on social media at The Flowers. So shout out to them. One of my favorite spots in the city.
And when we say Irish coffees, Ray, I've been there, I think, 3 occasions. And I'm trying to recall if I've ever seen anybody in the Buena Vista not drinking an Irish coffee. That's like all they have.
Yeah, it's really
they don't do many Bud Lights, I don't think.
They probably have it, but I never looked. Yeah, they have a full bar, right? But yeah, you can go look at the videos on YouTube or whatever if you haven't seen it. Again, it's where they invented the Irish coffee, and the bartenders will put out 15 glasses, and they'll just go drop the sugar in. Here comes the coffee. Here comes the hooch. Here comes the cream. It's a pretty cool thing to watch.
Yeah, you don't even need to be drinking to be entertained. You can just watch those bartenders go to work. Okay, Ray, let's get to work on our end. Let's tackle the news at hand, the business at hand. We'll actually start with these quarterbacks because, again, throughout the week, we're kind of tackling this position, a recap of what went down in 2023, a bit of a look ahead. Next week, we'll give some love to running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. We'll kind of do it throughout the month of January. Today, Ray, we're talking about the letdowns at quarterback. And as I noted, we're not going to throw Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert or Kirk Cousins into this world. Although, Ray, those guys were all disappointments because of injuries. And maybe I'll start there. This used to be a position where you could say, man, if you drafted a stud, that's all you need to draft. Don't worry about a backup. Because a lot of guys just played the 16 or 17 games. They stayed healthy. That obviously is going down the toilet lately, Ray. Last year was bad. This year was horrible. Is it now? And then we see, speaking of horrible, the backups. Like the backups leave so much that's lacking. Like if you have to turn to the likes of Easton Stick, you're done. You're cooked. I wonder, Ray, to start this discussion of disappointments, are we now maybe changing our idea of what you need to do on draft day with the QB position? I mean, do you need to draft a second quarterback? I've always been of the opinion, it's not necessary. If you draft Pat Mahomes, if you draft Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, these high-end guys, don't worry about a second quarterback. You can always pick one up on the waiver wire. Gosh, that really changed this season because the waiver wire pickups were pretty brutal and the starters were going down left and right. It would have been nice if you just had 2 starting quarterbacks to have on your roster.
It would have been, and I'm looking at the data right now. There were 9 quarterbacks who played every game. 9. I mean, that's woof. And, I think the real issue with what you're saying is, what if your backup quarterback, and this is someone that we pushed on people at fantasyguru.com, this is someone who's on my personal teams, Russell Wilson's rolling along, he's a fine QB2, everything's great, and they just benched him. I mean, even in the case of Russell Wilson, he was doing exactly what you needed him to do as your second quarterback. He was a great turn 2 pivot, injury, fill in, all that kind of stuff. And then in the fantasy playoffs, his team benched him. So, I mean, I don't know, Kyle. The 2 quarterback drafting thing, I think that people will do it more next year. I think that's fair. Whether it's the right thing to do, I think we still have to, it's determined based upon your league size, your bench size, how other people handle the position. Like if, 22 quarterbacks are drafted and you're sitting there in your last round, take quarterback 23. Like, I get that. If there's 15, 16 guys off the board, I'll throw out something that I've mentioned previously. And I know no one wants to do it. I'm not really sure why. We should do team quarterback. We should. Because obviously if you're drafting Patrick Mahomes, you don't care about Blaine Gabbert. You're taking the, so I don't know why we don't do that. So everyone at least has a quarterback. Because I know that people ran into this year, especially in superflex or 2 QB leagues where they legitimately didn't have a quarterback to turn to because there was no one that was available.
Well, and that's another point, Ray. In 2 QB leagues, superflex, you got to draft 3. You do. That position becomes so critical. Most of me, I'm used to just 1 QB leagues. That's mostly what I play. But a lot of those leagues are now changing to 2 QBs, as you note, superflex, and it's now mandatory, Ray. If you're going that way, it's not just, I can use 2 and, I'll be fine. No, you need 3 Because if you are falling from if you lose your second quarterback, maybe the 19th best quarterback in football, you're probably cooked. Because I would suspect, Ray, in 2 QB leagues and superflex leagues, of 12 teams, let's say, aren't 30 to 35 QBs getting drafted in leagues like that? I would think, because 24 automatically are getting drafted, and half the league's going to take a third quarterback.
Well, and you always say this yourself. You've always said, look, we shouldn't change the rules because of a one-off.
Yeah.
So I understand if people don't want to change things, because 2023 may be a one-off. However, I think it is a growing trend because the league does everything they possibly can to protect quarterbacks. There's nothing more the league can do. And these guys keep going down with injury. I think we, as an industry, legitimately should stop 2 quarterback leagues. Just stop. Because at the end of the day, when you've got guys, quarterbacks, even average quarterbacks scoring 15, 18 points a week because they're playing, if you don't have that second quarterback because you lost them, you're just out. You're losing. You're turning to, Jackson Smith and Jigba and hoping to get you 11 points. Like, you can't keep up. So I think we got to go to superflex leagues. I think that's because everyone still uses the second quarterback. I know in a superflex league I'm in, I had Anthony Richardson and Russell Wilson, right? Anthony Richardson goes down. Then Russell Wilson, gets at the end of the season. I'm playing Stidham and O'Connell. Like, that's not fun, right? So I think we should consider team quarterback. I think we should get rid of the second quarterback and play superflex leagues. But yeah, if you're in a league that's stubborn or in a deeper league, I mean, you're going to have to aggressively draft a quarterback. The problem is with all these guys going down with injury. And then some teams, I mean, look at the Browns. They signed a guy off the street in Joe Flacco. So it wouldn't matter if you had the backup in Cleveland, because that wasn't who actually ended up performing late in the year, Kyle.
Henry in the chat room says, on draft day, would you rather have a second QB or a second tight end? 100% second QB.
100%.
The second tight end thing, I just hate, because I don't even think it's a safe move. With the second quarterback, Ray, it's the safety of I still have a starter. Mm-hmm. Where with the second tight end, I mean, in all honesty, you're drafting, I don't know, the 16th best tight end or maybe the 13th best tight end. That's not safety. Even though the position was better this year and performed more capably, it's not like you're gaining a huge edge by saying, oh, I'm not going to have to go to the waiver wire to hunt down a tight end if my lead guy gets hurt. Because, Ray, for the most part, I don't think the 15th tight end is very different from, say, the 22nd. It's a crapshoot. So to me, having that second QB way more important than a second.
Yeah, and just look at it, because I know people love to look at points angle. That 15 to 22 tight end, that's an 8 or 9 point guy, right? The QB is a 15 to 18 point guy. It's just more important. It's just more important to have that piece. And again, it all depends upon your league settings. If it's, tight end premium, and, we can create scenarios, but in a traditional setup, the second quarterback is more important to your team than the second tight end.
Okay, we will leave that exit ramp and we'll get back on the highway of our main discussion, which is disappointing quarterbacks. Again, we're not including the guys who got injured. We are including, or I am including, Ray, Patrick Mahomes. We talked about him yesterday when we went through the best quarterbacks. He did finish as a QB1. But, Ray, I think it'd be a challenge to find a Patrick Mahomes owner this year who was happy with that. They probably feel that they got ripped off, because it's not just, oh, I took a good QB and he wasn't great. It's I took a good QB in the first round, because that was the price to pay for Mahomes in a lot of leagues out there, Ray, was, probably the back end of the first round, somewhere between like 9 and 15 is where he was landing. And so the price he paid was high. I guess the good news is at least he stayed healthy. We didn't have any injuries for Patrick Mahomes, which on occasion in the last few years he's missed a game or two, but he stayed upright. But the scoring was not to the level. 40 plus touchdowns is what you drafted him for, and he barely cleared 60% of that expectation with his touchdowns this year.
I ran a poll yesterday on Twitter X at the Ray Flowers. Who is the top fantasy football quarterback in 2024? And 3 guys, and then the field, right? So Josh Allen got 51% of the vote. Jalen Hurts got 10% of the vote. Patrick Mahomes got 8% of the vote. And it was interesting because someone, got a lot of back and forth, people talking about, player A or B. And the Mahomes, one person said with Mahomes, well, they really balanced the offense out more this year, so he didn't throw as much. And I checked the data; he threw 1 less pass a game. So it was the same. And then the person said, well, he doesn't run. Totally fair.
Yeah.
But as I pointed out, Patrick Mahomes in 2022 scored like 7 more points than Josh Allen in 2023. So it was just 12 months ago that the non-running quarterback was the top guy going. So it'll be very interesting to see, because the early returns, and this is one poll and who cares, but the early returns strongly suggest, remember, Mahomes is under 9%, that no one's taking him one. I had a couple people say he's not even a top 5 quarterback next year. So It'll be fascinating to see. I'm predicting he's going to go quarterback 3 off the board, but we'll see.
Okay, other disappointments at QB, and Ray, I guess I'll start with Trevor Lawrence, and I think he truly fits the definition, because Trevor Lawrence, Ray, was considered a very solid QB1, and I was one of those people. I liked this offense. I thought they would throw a ton, getting Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk. Now, he was not horrible, but he was not close to a QB1. I mean, he was drafted in the middle of QB1s. He didn't end up there. Now, late in the season, there were injuries, but Ray, don't let that distract from what was going on even before that point with Trevor Lawrence. It was a chore for him, and it was great to see Ingram over 100 catches, but honestly, they never seemed to be in a consistent groove with Calvin Ridley, and I was a little bit surprised at the lack of throwing with the Jaguars. I thought there would be another notch, another leap forward. I thought 600 passes was going to be easy for Trevor Lawrence, and it just wasn't the case this year with him.
I will say it this way. You didn't win because of Trevor Lawrence, but I don't think you lost because of Trevor Lawrence. Now, maybe you did because of the game you missed late and you had to scramble there, but I think you could have won with his level of production. Now, that said, he disappointed. I mean, we've talked about it here on the show. It's been a running theme at fantasyguru.com. He and the offense did not grow. He and the offense did not improve. There was none of that. And its eyeball test was even worse than the numbers, to be fair. Mm-hmm. So he goes into his 4th season now. He was supposed to be a generational performer at the NFL level. That's out the window. Okay. Yeah. The question is now, is he really even a franchise quarterback? Because you start looking at what he did and what he didn't do, and he's in that group of 8 quarterbacks that are kind of beyond the elites, and it's like, well, is he appreciably different than Russell Wilson? Oh, Ray, is he? I don't know. I don't know if he is.
Well, Russell Wilson's on this list too, Ray. And again, it's all expectations. He was not drafted to be a QB1 like Lawrence. But Wilson was drafted to be a QB2, a solid QB2. I thought Sean Payton would lift this offense up a bit. It didn't really happen, Ray. Even like the good games for Russell Wilson, it was a true battle, Ray, to get him over 200 yards passing. You'd maybe get 2 touchdowns, a touchdown here to Cortland Sutton and maybe a touchdown here to Adam Troutman or somebody. But that was it with Russell Wilson. And, the results early were fantasy-wise, the numbers were good. But like you mentioned, the eye test, that was still really lacking with Russell Wilson. And now we go into an offseason, and his status with Denver is totally up in the air. And maybe he lands elsewhere. Maybe they move on and he's a starter. But we're looking at Russell Wilson now, Ray, as nothing more than a game manager, no matter where he ends up, I think.
Yeah, and Russell Wilson scored as many touchdowns or produced as many touchdowns this year as Lamar Jackson. Look it up, 29 each. And I think that in the case of Wilson, he benefited because he was a top 15 quarterback this year in fantasy. Even with the benching at the end, he benefited because he played every week. Now, on a per-game basis, was he great? No. You're totally right saying the guy was throwing for 187 yards every week or whatever the hell it was, and he needed that second touchdown or he was a disappointment. Yeah. There weren't any spike games. There weren't 300 passing yards. This was just, I'm there every week. I'm solid every week. I'm quarterback 15, right? And, again, there's value to that because he was drafted not to be a top 10 quarterback or anything like that. But I think the way the season ended and the fact that there were no spike weeks was obviously disappointing.
And the other 2 disappointments on here, Ray, are kind of in the Russell Wilson boat. If you drafted these guys, you got them late. They were your QB2. But if we rewind the clock to late August, early September, both these guys were considered, that's a good bet as a QB2. That's a good roll of the dice. It's Bryce Young and Mac Jones. Now, it's almost chuckle-worthy, Ray, to think, Mac Jones back in late August, because there was so much of, he's figured it out. Offensive coordinator and him are on the same page. This is the year for Mac Jones. Utter disaster, Ray, and he's probably, the rest of his career, he's a backup, right? That's what Mac Jones, a backup QB, not a fantasy backup. This guy's a backup QB. And with Bryce Young, Ray, I don't know that it was particularly bad, but I think the problem he runs into is C.J. Stroud figured it out.
Yeah.
And so that comparison, he looks really bad compared to C.J. Stroud. It's 1 year. It used to be, Ray, if we saw a rookie quarterback perform like Bryce Young this year, you'd say, yeah, kind of what you expect. He's a rookie. Nowadays, no, you got to hit the ground running, and he did not in 2023.
Yeah, and even if Bryce Young has a solid career, he's always going to be a loser because of CJ Stroud. Just because of CJ Stroud. You know what I mean? It's like CJ, and this, they're playing the audio on SiriusXM from draft day. Jeff Mann's up there, saying it with his chest, saying if you're taking Bryce Young over CJ Stroud, you're bananas. And he was one of the few people anywhere that said that. The fact is, Bryce Young looks like your 10-year-old kid, right? He just does. And then here's CJ Stroud. He's 6'3", 225, zinging balls. The eye test, again, I'm not a college football guy. I'm not a scout. But I don't know how you could look at those two guys and not prefer CJ Stroud, just from the physical look at these two guys, the way they carry themselves. And then you watch the performance this year, and it's not fair to judge Young because, again, the Panthers are arguably the worst organization in football. They're terrible all the way to the top. But Bryce Young, as I said earlier this season, I just don't see with Bryce Young him being anything other than a Baker Mayfield, right? He's a game manager. He's a guy that can have good games. He can win some football games. He can produce some decent numbers. He's not a difference maker. He'll never be a difference maker. You have to surround him with everybody in order for him to do that. And that's, when you're the number one pick in the country, that's not the way it should be.
Stroud's going to be a top 10 QB next year. Is Bryce Young even going to be top 25? In fantasy football next year?
I don't care. I'm going to say go for it.
Yeah.
Because again, the Panthers are in utter disarray. The front office is in disarray. The coaching staff is in disarray. The offense is in disarray. I have no idea what pieces are going to be there. Who's he going to even have to operate with? There's going to be all these glowing reports, I bet. Right? We're already starting to see the cover from him. There were too many people saying things to him. I get it. There's a lot that goes with being the number one pick and a quarterback in the NFL. But I just can't see there being, like you're talking about earlier, I can't see that step we were expecting from Trevor Lawrence this year that didn't happen. I'm not expecting a step from Bryce Young next year.
Those are what we are terming the disappointments of 2023. Again, many of you might say, no, the disappointment was losing Aaron Rodgers in week 1. I get it. That was a letdown, and that was a harbinger of things to come this season. Tomorrow we will tackle some of those vets who are coming off some severe injuries and kind of what the outlook is. Guys like Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow, they kind of put pause on their career. Where do they go from here? So we'll talk about those injured quarterbacks coming up tomorrow as we continue our breakdown of all things quarterbacks. Moving to some news and notes, some playoff news. Ray, first off with the Miami Dolphins. I guess pretty good news. Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, both limited. Tyreek Hill limited. It would appear, Ray, going into this weekend, they play Saturday night against Kansas City. It sounds like these guys are going to give it a go on Saturday. But, I don't know if that necessarily. I wish I knew exactly how healthy they were. In the playoffs, you play this game if you're 80%.
Right.
If you're 80% in the regular season, like they may have been last week, even in a big time situation, Ray, they didn't play against the Bills, which is a bit of a worry, I think, going into Kansas City and trying to get these guys right for the first week of the playoffs.
By the way, I might have had an aneurysm. Correct me if I'm wrong. Tyreek Hill, who was missing plays late in the game, was healthy enough to do backflips, right? Right?
Maybe backflips are easier than playing professional football.
Oh, okay. They're playing. To your point, they're playing. Now, is that 6 snaps? Is there effectiveness here? Yeah. And, you feel – I don't know if you feel bad for teams, but I kind of do feel a little bad for the Dolphins because they're signing guys off the street. Like, they're in utter disarray. Their offense is all beat up. Their defense is trashed. Everyone's hurt. They obviously have a chance to win the football game, but it's going to be a steep climb. And if guys like Mostert and Waddle aren't close to 100%, the offense is rather – predictable is not the right word. They're not balanced enough to do enough to put up big points without those guys being effective.
Well, and what have we always heard about the Dolphins this year? It's how fast their players are. Like, you constantly hear that. That was the big storyline. Well, the Dolphins are just doing things the rest of the NFL can. Look at all the speed. That's great, but Ray, when you're not 100%, you lose the speed. And now what do you got? And, Raheem Mostert, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, they're still fat. I mean, they're NFL players. But if your number one thing, and I heard this everywhere, was speed, 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 that's what the Dolphins have on everybody in football. Well, now you don't. So what do you have? And they're going to be on the road in Kansas City, going to be frigid on Saturday night. You just tend to think, Ray, and I don't know if this is fair, but like Miami in 0-degree weather, they don't connect. Like Tua Tagovailoa playing they don't really connect. So that is a worry, I think, for Saturday night.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to be frigid. Is your word? That's the case. There's all these people talking about one of the coldest games and all this kind of stuff. And in that type of game, Miami's they're used to 98 degrees with 99% humidity, but they're not. And to your point, this is not a grinded out offense. Yeah. There's not an Icky Woods. There's not a Riggins back in the back. Like this is a speed that doesn't work there. So that's another level of concern. And it's really interesting because I think that both the Eagles and the Chiefs hit the playoffs. It's like, but we talked earlier in the week. The Eagles got the Bucks. I think the Chiefs have the advantage here against Miami. Both these teams might find their footing in week one. We'll see.
And what I tend to enjoy about these games, and it's very important for both teams, the ball is a rock when you're throwing it. And we know the Chiefs have had issues holding on to the football on passes. Like, Ray, there's a part of me that says Kadarius Toney needs to be nowhere near the active roster for this game.
Stick him. Call Lester Hayes, man. Let's go.
Yeah, but same thing for Miami. It's like, you better be ready to catch the football. Because these are tough. It's rarely talked about, but that's a really difficult part of playing games in sub-zero temperatures. Is the ball is just a rock, and the quarterbacks are still throwing it as hard as ever. But there's not much give when these balls hit you in the paws. So we'll see what goes on with those wide receivers. Speaking of wide receivers and of Saturday, before that Chiefs-Dolphins game, the Browns and the Texans will meet. And right now, Noah Brown and Amari Cooper, both pretty big question marks, I think, for this game. And I'd like to believe they're going to play, but they did not practice on Tuesday.
I'm going to assume that Cooper was a rest. I think he's got a very legitimate chance to play. And in fact, I'm expecting him to play. Noah Brown, I've got no idea. And this is just a continuation as something we've talked about all year long. The Texans can't keep their wide receivers healthy. Don't know why. It's just the way it's worked out. We're likely looking at, 12, 14 targets to Nico Collins, something like that. Robert Woods is beat up too. So the Brown thing, talk about a guy that's done the yo-yo thing. There was a couple of weeks there where he put up 300 yards in back-to-back weeks, and he's posting bagels. Then he's not playing. He has been all over the map. And right now I don't get a good sense about his willingness or his ability to contribute in week one of the playoffs.
Yeah, it's a back injury with Brown. I think it's a heel mainly with Amari Cooper. So those are things to follow going into the week. We should note Cleveland is not going to have Dustin Hopkins, their place kicker. So he missed the last couple of games this season. He's not ready. So what is it? Riley Patterson? I think that's who's going to be handling the kicking if you dare. He's going to be handling it for the Browns coming up on Saturday. A couple of other things. Defensively, T.J. Watt of the Steelers will not play in the game against Buffalo. So he is out, defensive player of the year kind of player, not going to be available for the Steelers. And then, of course, the 49ers are off this week, but there was a mention that they aren't even practicing Christian McCaffrey this week. Makes total sense. And Ray, that got swept under the rug because, week 18, who's playing? Mm-hmm. McCaffrey, it wasn't like some major injury. Right. And then people just naturally expected him to sit. Even if he was healthy, he was going to sit in week 18. That was kind of the expectation. But we haven't heard really the nature of this calf injury. I don't believe it's serious, but nobody has really reported on what's really going on with Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I found it really interesting. I looked this up because someone said, spurred me to look it up. Derrick Henry, Mr. Durable, right? He's had 1 year where he hasn't been healthy. He's always carrying the ball, carrying half the other team to the goal line with him like that. He's got 2 seasons in his career with 325 touches. Christian McCaffrey's got 4. Okay. And, McCaffrey was incredibly healthy this year. That's always been the knock with him. Because remember, he's had seasons, I think, of 3 and 7 games played. He's an aging running back. He led the NFL in touches yet again this season. I think the injury right now is minor as well. It didn't seem like a big deal when it happened. There's been no concern here in the Bay Area. I think it's smart to rest him. There's nothing to be gained here. But let's just hope that the CMC thing doesn't become the Raheem Mostert thing. Because Mostert was on his way to, one of the greatest seasons of all time for the Dolphins franchise, scoring all these touchdowns. We kept saying he was going to get hurt. He never got hurt. And then he got hurt at the fantasy playoffs, and that was it. And now he's, got issues coming into the playoffs. Let's hope that the Niners head into their game next week with the healthy Christian McCaffrey.
Again, 49ers off, Ravens off. Everybody else is playing this week. Quick look at the playoff schedule. We brought this up earlier in the week, but on Wednesdays, we usually like to get you set for the week to come. So here's what we've got. Plan your weekend accordingly. 2 games on Saturday, 3 on Sunday, 1 on Monday. Cleveland, Houston. That game is down in Texas. It's a 4:30 kickoff on Saturday. The Browns, Ray, are actually favored in that game. 2.5 points. The over-under is 44.5. Cleveland's a great story, but kind of wonder what that's a tough game for me to pick, because neither team do I look at and say, oh, they're a team you got to worry about. And I guess on occasion they are. I mean, Houston has gone places and won some big battles, and Cleveland has won some big games. But I tend to think with the Browns, Ray, they are a very different defense when they've been at home this year. Like, they are brute. They get after it in front of the home fans. On the road, not so much. I kind of think Houston should be a slight favorite, maybe a point or two. I kind of go the other way in this game.
It's tough because you've got Joe Flacco, and we've all seen Joe Flacco for 2 decades, and no one's overly impressed, but he killed it for the most part down the stretch, despite the interception, the turnovers. You've got a guy making his first playoff start in CJ Stroud. We just talked about the receiving core beat up. Tank Dell is out. They're looking at, Brown being out again. Like, let's hope it's a good game. Right? Mm-hmm. Because I think there's a lot of storylines in that game that would be good for the league as well as good for us as fans.
Kansas City for a Saturday night, 4.5 point favorite against Miami. Total there's 44. I guess that's all weather driven, Ray, because you think to yourself, Kansas City against Miami, if that would happen in like October. Well, I'm even think they played in Germany. I'm trying to think what the over, it had to be in the 50s. When those two teams met in Germany, but I guess the weather, it's all the way down at 44 for Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, they average over 50 together this season. So yeah, it's that I think you're right there. And there's partly what we talked about with the Dolphins. There's some concern, I think, what their offense going to look like in the weather and with the health situations as well.
Kickoffs on Sunday, 1 o'clock, 4:30, and 8:15. 1 o'clock, Pittsburgh at Buffalo. Buffalo is a double-digit favorite against the Steelers. We mentioned TJ Watt being out, so that is a big hit for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But 10 points for Buffalo. The over-under is 36. Ray, are the Steelers that much of an underdog in your mind? 10 points is huge when you get to the postseason.
Yeah, I think that the TJ Watt situation is obviously massive. Their defensive backfield's been beat up as well. The Bills have that ability, as we've seen repeatedly, to play a bad half of football and then score 17 points and a half kind of thing. I'm okay with that spread. I think that because again, let's also remember Mason Rudolph has played well, but it's Mason Rudolph too. I think the Bills win this one handily. Packers
Cowboys down in Big D. Dallas favored by 7.5 against Green Bay. The total there is 50.5. But even later on Sunday, the 8:15 game, Rams and Lions, 51.5. Obviously playing in the Dome. Detroit is favored by 3. Ray, that Detroit team still wondering about Sam Laporta. Is that a biggie? Like, do you worry about the Lions offense without a guy like Laporta who had 84 catches this year? Is that like maybe bigger than other teams losing a tight end, I guess?
I think it's fair because it's not just what Laporta does, it's the attention he draws, right? The safety valve nature. The Lions receiving core, Raymond had an issue with his leg last week too. Their receiving core is not filled with, bona fide guys. A lot of the receivers are smaller guys too, physically. So I think it's significant, but this is also a team that, can and will run the football effectively. Jared Goff, for the most part, has played good football, playing at home, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a blow, but I think it is one that the Lions can overcome and still win the football game.
Again, that's Sunday evening from Ford Field in Detroit, 8:15 the kickoff. Then Monday night, we're down in Tampa, Philadelphia taking on the Bucks. Total is 44. The Eagles are a favorite. That's a dangerous favorite, isn't it, Ray? Eagles favored by 3 against the Bucks.
I think it is, yes. I think it's the right call. I think it is dangerous, though. And I will say this, too. You know where I'm going. Listeners do, too. Why is the NFL playing on Monday? Like, come on, man. Like, let's get the guys 7 days off and make it fair in the playoffs at least. Can we possibly? No, we can't do that even in the playoffs.
Terrible. Oh, come on, Ray. Of all the things you're complaining about that Monday night.
I'm complaining about that. They have one less day to prepare physically, mentally, emotionally for the next game. This is the
Yeah, but they
playoffs.
get an
Everyone
extra
should be
day
the
from their
same.
last game.
Yeah, well, and is it a coincidence that they're playing the late game when they've got AJ Brown hurt? I don't
He was
know.
doing MRI today on his knee.
Devonta Smith hurt. Did the
Yeah.
league give them an extra day? Because I don't know.
Well, anybody you put on Monday has probably got an injured guy that's going to feel better, So I don't know if it was an Eagles move. I think what happens, Ray, is the smallest audience of the weekend is either the early Saturday game. I got to look this up, but I feel like every single time the Houston Texans have been in the playoffs, I feel like, Ray, they play the early game on Saturday. Like they never get prime time respect. So the two ugly windows are the early game on Saturday and Monday Night Football. So,
well, and as Trigger Finger pointed out, the finger of Hurts isn't at 100%. It's just another. It's conspiracy.
Conspiracy. That's what we traffic in here at FSD, or at least one of us traffics in it. Mr. Ray Flowers. Okay, playoff fantasy football. I don't know if there's a lot of formats here, Ray. It's like maybe 2 or 3 different ones I think people have fallen into. Now, DFS is going on, and a lot of people love DFS, and I get it for the playoffs. DFS is a great deal of fun. And we do point you in the direction of Russell Clay, articles up at fantasyguru.com, kind of giving his thoughts on the various setups. Ray, my favorite is one and done. So that's where I lean towards, which for people who haven't played that, you draft a new team every week. But every week, if you have already played a guy during the playoffs, he is no longer available to you. And what I appreciate it, Ray, is it kind of takes the fantasy side of choosing which players are the best, but it also takes the side of real life football and trying to figure out who's going to win, who's going to advance, who's going to be there at the end, and then kind of moving that jigsaw puzzle around. It's a league setup, Ray, where especially in the first week, like if you really want to be good at one and done, that first week where you're getting set for all these games, Ray, I think the prep is like at least an hour to build your team. Like if you really care about this now, most people aren't going to spend an hour on building their week 1 team. But Ray, you got to look at which positions are strong, which teams are going to be one and done, which teams from the first weekend have a shot, in your opinion, of making it to the Super Bowl. There's a lot of moving parts, which I kind of love that. Fantasy football, there's not so much. You draft and then every week, outside of injuries and bye weeks, you kind of just rolling with things. But man, with one and done in the playoffs, and I even think one and done in season can be fun. I know you and I have been a part of those leagues before, but in the playoffs especially, a lot of strategy goes into place with that sort of league setup.
Yeah, it's something you and I have done for years, played the playoff leagues. And, I always say it, work backwards. Like Kyle was saying, you got to put your grid together of who you think is going to make the Super Bowl and work backwards, because you want to use the best option you can that aren't going to be playing the next week. So there's the balancing act of the players and the team, which again is something that Kyle loves. Someone in Discord yesterday, really interesting, Kyle. I don't want to get your take on this. They do the regular season, and then their finals are in the playoffs. So this is still regular season for them. Still the fantasy. They draft a team in week 1. They draft a team in week 2. That's the finals, which to me, I don't like at all, because now we're like you said, during the regular season, we could care less who wins and loses games. In the playoffs now, we have to think about that. And I don't know, we're using totally different teams
than we
used during the regular season. Yeah.
Well, it in effect is like saying, oh, what you did for 18 weeks, that's great and all, but who cares now? Build a whole new team, and now you're dealing with the postseason. I'm sure the people that are in it probably enjoy it, which I'm not here to say this sucks, this one isn't, but to me, that's not very attractive. I want to crown a champion who has players that he drafted back in August, and he did well with those guys. Plus, now you're down to 14 of the 32 teams, and I don't know. It may be fun. To me, I just would be done with the regular season, finish that off, and carry over into the playoffs and start anew. Other setups, Ray, you have the draft and hold setup, which I've never been a fan of because, if things go wrong, you're done in week 1. And what's the use of playing anymore after that? There are some leagues that are draft and hold, Ray, and I've noticed they give like bonus points. If your guy survives, like every week that they play, they get 3 bonus points, which can even up the field a bit more. It also makes guys from the 49ers and Ravens a bit more attractive, because if they get into the Super Bowl or even that league championship game, they get those bonus points. Also, and I think Russell brought this up, multiplier leagues, where maybe a touchdown in week 1 is worth 6. But Ray, in week 2, if you get a touchdown, it's worth 9, to kind of even up that field. And that does allow you to play catch up. If you get buried in week 1, if you still have some guys in week 2, week 3 with that multiplier effect, I guess you're still in it after the first week of the postseason.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this: just play the one and done, because to me, and I try to simplify things. I think there's enough complication involved with everything. Let's try to simplify things. Play whatever format works for you. Play whatever one you like. The one we're describing now with the multiplier, I don't like that. I don't like that. I know that is a popular format for people. I would play the one and done. And I think there's enough strategy, team-wise and player-wise, to work through with that. It is the one I'm most comfortable with, but I think the reason I'm most comfortable with is also because I think it's the best format to utilize.
What about best ball? I haven't really thought of best ball for the playoffs, but I guess it's out there and available. People love best ball for the regular season. It allows them to draft in May, and build teams. But what about for the postseason? Because I've seen that in a few places, the idea of best ball.
I mean, again, if that's what you want to do, go for it. I would rather do the one and done. Let's be honest about this. If you can't commit 10 minutes a week to putting the team together, do you really care? I mean, the best ball thing is people do 100 of them and they're trying to win money and they're trying to prep, learn the ins and outs of drafting. For the playoffs, you can't spend 10 minutes a week putting a team together. So I don't, for me, no, but for a lot of other people, sure. Because that, again, you have to predict the wins, the losses, how far a team's going to go. There is obviously that second level of strategy there. I just would prefer to go on a weekly basis.
I believe, and I don't know this for a fact, but I believe, Ray, all the providers do have some sort of playoff leagues available. So if people, I think all the ones I've been in, Ray, are my fantasy league, which I've enjoyed. I don't play on, MFL in season too much anymore. Used to back in the day, but haven't had many leagues there lately. But my playoff leagues, Ray, I think have always been with my fantasy league. And perhaps that's because they're very user-friendly. And I say that as in you can pretty well create whatever kind of setup and whatever kind of scoring and rosters that you want there. There's a lot of commissioner control available at my fantasy league. And for me, it's been very good for the playoffs. So if people are looking for a league, that's probably just through experience where I would send people.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's very basic looking, but I like that. It's not overly complicated. There's not videos playing in the background. And it's like you said, it's very customizable. And my fantasy league is the spot. I think that, going back on a decade now we've used for the playoffs. We're using it again for the listener league, the Elite Sports Listener League on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio with Jeff Manns. There's 100 spots available. I think it's down to high 80s now or something. So listen to the show today on Sirius XM 3 to 5 Eastern. But yeah, I think that for a decade that's been the default, and I'm totally happy with it.
Yeah. And as we talk about it this week, obviously we'll hit on some DFS stuff because that's going to be big Saturday and Sunday, even Monday. And we'll have coverage at fantasyguru.com. So fear not, there'll be cheat sheets, all that stuff. But when Ray and I kind of talk about playoff leagues, we're going to do this Thursday and Friday on the show. We'll kind of focus on the one and done setup. So that's kind of where we'll keep it for our purposes. Both Ray and I appreciate that setup more. So we'll kind of focus our discussion on that. If you've got questions for your own playoff league, though, by all means, you can hit us up in chat. You can go to Discord. People are willing to help on that front, too. But certainly do something. It's a lot of fun, and it gives you a little extra juice for the upcoming weekend. Looking at the Texans, because I wanted to clarify this, Ray, I pulled up their playoff history.
Okay.
Wild card round. They have played in 2011 the early game against the Bengals on Saturday. 2012, the early game against the Bengals on a Saturday. 2015 was the early game on a Saturday against the Chiefs.
That's a good trend.
2016, I don't know if this was the early game, but I believe it was against the Raiders on a Saturday. 2018, the early game against the Colts on a Saturday. And then 2019 was a Saturday against Buffalo in the early game. So in the wild card round, Ray, you can be assured of one thing. The Texans will always play that early game on Saturday. Now, they have played on Sundays in the next round and stuff, but it's always Saturday for the wild card round with the Texans. They own that slot.
And I know this is not practical because of television. I understand that. But every game should be on Sunday. Just like I was talking about teams on Monday, guys playing this week on Saturday, they lose a day too. And this is not – it's bad. It's after an entire season of games and all the injuries. You're also condensing the amount of time the coaching staffs had to implement.
It doesn't change the outcome, right?
Of course it does. Of course, at some point over the last 10 years when they've done this, of course it has. Players have been hurt. Coaching staffs haven't been able to implement all the plays they want on offense and defense. It should just be the same because every team should just be dealt with the same. Whether it's right or wrong, they should all be the same. And in this instance, it's staggered. Just not good. I understand it. It's never going to change, but it's just not good.
Ray Flowers begs for the day where every game started at 1 o'clock on Sunday.
It was weird.
No night games, no afternoon games, no Thursday. Every single – and as somebody, Ray, who has to follow all this action on Sunday, I totally disagree with you. That would be hell on earth if 1 o'clock Eastern every Sunday, 16 games kicked off. That would be impossible to keep track of.
It was interesting in week 18 with the schedule change, right? Because there were so many afternoon games. I'm like, oh, wow. Because I don't know, maybe for East Coast people it sucked, but as a West Coast person, I'm like, I could deal with this. But yeah, it was different.
Yeah, throughout the season, the late afternoon slot on Sunday, there's like a max of 4 games. Yeah. I mean, maybe there was one other week with 5, but this last weekend it was 7. Yeah. Again, this week, 2 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday, and 1 on Monday. And Ray Flowers can cry about it all weekend long. NFL coaching news. Mike Vrabel out. You surprised by that, Ray? I'm a little surprised by that. I will say this. They're now looking for a coach. They're going to probably be looking for a new running back. They're probably moving on from Ryan Tannehill. Like, it's rebuild time with the Titans, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And it's actually probably a good thing for Vrabel so that he doesn't end up with a bunch of 5 and 6 win seasons on his record because this team's in trouble. And they got a lot of work to do. And it's not a quick fix because, as you noted, they don't have a running back. They don't have a quarterback, which is the biggest piece. The defense is starting to struggle as well. So that's an organization that's going to have to probably go down a little bit more before they go up.
Vrabel's going to have a job immediately. I would assume, like, the Patriots is a natural one, I think. But Ray, he could end up in L.A. He could end up in Vegas.
Atlanta.
We won't be going to Chicago. We've got a report Matt Eberflus is back for 2024. But even Carolina, like, he should really have his pick of the litter. And that's coming off of, what, a pretty ugly season. Like, the team wasn't performing well. The last 2 years haven't been good for the Titans. But he can still pretty well walk up to any GM, and they'll hand him the job, I bet.
I would think. I mean, he's obviously very accomplished. I think that you hear only good things with him. He's had a track record of success. I find it interesting. Mike Garofalo, there's a report out this morning that there's real interest in the Panthers head coaching job. Who the hell wants to coach the Panthers? That organization's in the toilet. We don't know about the quarterback. We know that their owner's a hothead. Like, why would Mike Vrabel's not going there unless they pay him $1 gazillion? Why would he do that?
I agree with you. Who would want to go there? But then, like, the Raiders, is that a spot you want to go? I mean, they just tear through coaches left and right. They'll pay you a lot of money, but it seems to be a mess there. And the Chargers, you know, you hear, I know Justin Herbert's like, wow, I get a franchise quarterback. That's like awesome. But everybody, when they talk about LA, they talk about like the Spanos family, and they're just too hands-on. They're too involved. And so it's like 3 organizations there, Ray, where it's like, do you really want to deal with that crap? And hey, everybody wants an NFL head coaching job. So I guess you'll bite your tongue and deal with it. Hope for the best. I did notice the Chargers, they've requested upwards of 30 dudes to interview. I mean, everybody's requesting guys, Ray, but the Chargers, it's like out of control with all the people they're bringing in.
Yeah, I love that he talked to Kellen Moore, the guy who oversaw that wonderous offense. Let's have him be our head coach. I mean, look, like you said, it's NFL head coaching jobs. There's 32 of them, right? And, you know, if there's one offered, I guess, even if it's the Panther, when you take it, right? Because when are you going to get another opportunity? The problem is you have to gauge it's different if you're 35 years old or you're 62 years old, right? There's a difference there. Chargers have pieces. If they can stay healthy on offense, they've got the quarterback at least, which is a kind of a prime and important piece, obviously. But that organization, like you said, it's tough when you see organizations wallow in mediocrity for years, and they change the players and they change the coach. What's the consistent? It's the ownership. That is something to think about.
Yeah, Atlanta's kind of dealing with that too. Another open position there. We'll get you some more football tomorrow. Obviously, more on the playoffs. We'll see if any coaching hires do occur, injuries, all that stuff. Got about 10 minutes here, Ray, and the long-awaited promise will finally come to fruition. Baseball. Going to do a little baseball here because Ray and I have not been able to talk much at all the last 5 days about the world of Major League Baseball, getting set for Week 18, the playoffs, all that good stuff. But Ray, we have had some decent-sized signings in the last few days, even a big trade. Here in the last 15 hours or so, Ray, it sounds like the Cubs, who have not made a move all off-season, like they've been extremely quiet. Ray, I think it's Imanaga, is that right? Do you know for sure the pronunciation?
That sounds, I think that's fair, yes.
You're going to go with that. Imanaga for now. We'll certainly learn it as we hear, but I think he's undergoing a physical today. Sounds like they've already got a press conference for Friday. Ray, he's not like the most sought-after dude. I mean, we saw Yamamoto be the most sought-after dude from Japan, and we've seen some other relievers ink deals. The Padres added a couple of them. But what are we looking at with Imanaga going to the Cubs?
Yeah, and I love Jim Bowden tweeted out last night when the deal was kind of being announced unofficially that this is a super complicated deal with 47 opt-outs and 37. Like, I mean, more power. It's really interesting how some players have so much power because it's like, you know, Imanaga's never thrown a pitch, obviously, in the big leagues, and he's getting all kinds of opt-outs in his contract, and there's all these teams bidding for his services. I think there's always the concern, as we discuss and everyone discusses, and this will be something I dive into more because I guess I have to throw him into the rookie article at fantasyguru.com, even though he's not a rookie. Dive in more too, but there's always a concern because the game is different here, the strike zone is different here, the training is different here, the baseball is different, the stadiums are different, everything is different, right? And when you see a lot of these pitchers like Imanaga, you hear a lot of things and you see the numbers of control, because there's risk avoidance is a huge thing in the Asian countries. And he's very good at controlling the strike zone. Does he have overpowering stuff? No. Is he a dominator? No. Is he someone that can be, as the question from David P there says, can he be a 3 or 4 in the rotation for the Cubs? I think that's their expectation. Now, that's not 3 or 4 in the fantasy game. That's a 3 or 4 for the Cubs. I think he's a mid-rotation major league arm. I think that's kind of what we're setting as the baseline, and we'll dive in more to kind of hone that a little bit more, Kyle.
Well, we should know, Ray, he's 30, so he's a lot older than a guy like Yamamoto. I haven't seen the innings on his arm. I didn't pull up any stats. Maybe you can take a look at that. I will say, in my investigation of Shota Imanaga, he has a great nickname. And this is so like Japanese baseball or, you know, style nickname. He is called the pitching philosopher. So, Ray, we're bringing a philosopher to Major League Baseball. They don't give those nicknames stateside, but he is. Oh, no, not the pitching. The throwing philosopher. Even better. The throwing philosopher. I just may call him that for shorthand. The philosopher with the Cubs.
He's a left-handed Greg Maddux. That's who he is.
Exactly.
He's thrown 1,129 innings in 8 years. He's had one season of 160 innings pitched. Okay. That's not rare. That's how the game is played, the 6-man rotations and everything like that. So that's one of the big transitions to the States is, you know, how do they handle the change and from 6-man to 5-man, this calendar itself. But, I mean, he's got seasons 150, 150, 150. He's very reasonable to think he can throw 160 innings this season.
Sounds like about $15 million a year, and as Ray said, it's going to be a really complicated contract, so we'll have to see. But that's kind of the salary we're working with, I guess, on that front. Ray, speaking of pitching, your Giants have added some pitching. Unfortunately, it's a guy who won't be healthy, I don't think, on opening day. They made a trade over the weekend, bringing in Robbie Ray from Seattle. Giving up Mitch Haniger, who's back in Seattle. The Ray side of this, Ray, it appears like every single year there's like 2 pitchers where we go into draft season. It's like, oh, I'm going to stash this guy, you know, because he's going to be back. And I guess this year, Robbie Ray will be one of them. Probably Max Scherzer, I'm guessing, is another. And they may be another couple guys crop
Clayton Kershaw, too.
Yeah, Clayton Kershaw. That's a good point. So a lot of guys, but man, it always sounds good to stash these guys on draft day, but I feel like, Ray, it's more of a letdown than like a big win when a guy doesn't return until July. I always feel like, we get anxious and excited about this. We think they're going to return and just be ready to roar. And I guess it happens, but I feel like a lot of these guys, Ray, they come back and their innings are still down. They're getting skipped and they aren't as effective. A guy like Scherzer is going to be pushing 40 coming off such an injury. But with Robbie Ray, what are we thinking? June? Is that kind of the expectation for him?
Maybe even later, maybe the second half after the All-Star break
Okay.
is kind of what you're hearing. I think it's very interesting. According to what I read, he has an opt-out after this season in his contract, which is, he's leaving the Giants after the season if it doesn't go perfectly, right? So that's great for the Giants. I don't know why the Giants continue to sign or trade for guys that have opt-outs in their contracts. It's bewildering to me. But I think in the case of Ray, sounds like his recovery is going well and everything, and the expectations are, at one point he'll be able to return to who he was. But what's the one issue with Robbie Ray that we've always dealt with?
Control.
What's the one issue coming back from surgery that's always an issue?
Control.
He might have a 5.5 ERA, and have a WHIP of 1.46. So I think it was a fine move for the Giants if they could convince Ray to stay long term. I agree with you. I don't know how much of a payoff we get this season. And if you have a league where you got unlimited, IL spots, or okay, fine, you can take Ray, the last pick, that kind of thing. But I agree with you. I think that as we go through this, more often than not, the guys that we think in March are going to really give us something in the second half when they return from that injury don't usually pay off.
And in the case of Haniger, Ray, I guess he's not injured right now, but he's bound to get injured soon. and that's the issue with him. I got nothing against Mitch Haniger, Ray, but I can never target him or load up on Mitch Haniger shares just because there's always something keeping this guy on the sidelines.
Yeah, he's 33 years old now, and his last healthy season was with Seattle in 2021, and he had 39 home runs and 100 RBIs and 100 runs. It was really good. And, he was almost that good in 2018. So we have seen him be very productive, but he's 33. You're totally right to say there's injuries all the time. He didn't play in the 2020 season. He's been under 65 games each of the last 2 years. In a mixed league, I think you're a glutton for punishment if you take him. In an AL only league, let's go. Let's take that chance that he hits 25 home runs and stays healthy enough to do that. But in a mixed league scenario, he's got to be well down your draft board.
And then another Seattle outfielder has moved on to L.A. Teoscar Hernandez over the weekend, Ray, inking a deal with the Dodgers. Who else? Everybody wants to be a Dodger. The power's legit, Ray. I don't think there's any doubt this guy can, even in L.A., hit 25 home runs. It's just, what else is there, I guess, to Teoscar Hernandez's game? He's into his 30s now. So strikeouts probably will continue to go up. I don't know if the average is going to be there. Your level of interest with Hernandez, you love going to that kind of lineup, and it sounds like maybe not a true everyday gig, but he's going to play a lot with the LA Dodgers. One issue you've got is the DH is eaten up by Ohtani, so you're not going to be able to DH Teoscar Hernandez. And they do have some moving pieces in the outfield that they can adjust, but Hernandez, if healthy, probably looking at 140 games starting with the LA Dodgers.
Yeah, and he's a legitimate power hitter, to your point. It's going to be a great lineup for support and run production and all of that. We saw him take a massive step forward in 2021 when it all came together. Yeah. And one of the big keys that season was, here's a guy that strikes out 30+% at the time who dropped the strikeout rate down to 25%. Big difference, right? And that led to the success he had. 2 years ago, the number went up to 28%. Last year, the number was back up over 31%. He struck out 211 times last year. So when you're that swing and miss, your batting average fluctuates. Max Muncy, his teammate now, same kind of thing. There's a lot of strikeouts here. So, he's hit 285 or better in 2 of the last 4 years. The last 2 years, he's been under 270. He could be in the 230s with that strikeout rate. That's the real issue with him. And because of the crowded nature of the outfield, as you pointed out, I think that, we want to get super excited for him because of the team and what's going on there with the Dodgers. But I think we have to be a little cautious because of the strikeouts and the potential loss of playing time as well.
Elsewhere, it sounds like the Yankees are the leader to get Marcus Stroman. They do need some pitching, so that's kind of a perfect fit there. A veteran that's not going to cost you an arm and a leg, but can certainly fill in as a number 3 starter, maybe even a 4 with the Yankees. On the other side of town, Ray, do you care about Sean Manaea going to the Mets? Is that moving the needle at all for you?
Interesting. As someone who watched him with the Giants, he was utilized as an opener. He's utilized as a long reliever, a starter. He was kind of that flex guy on the pitching staff. And not that 2 years, $28 million is a huge contract for the Mets, but that's not reliever money. That's starter money, right? So they assume he's going to be starting. And, there's been a lot of talk about the addition of the sweeper and the velocity came back last year. I think it's a fine signing for what it was. I think he's got the opportunity to be, a decent fourth, fifth starter for the Mets. Am I excited in the fantasy space? No. I mean, you can round a rotation out with him. I think you can get a Taiwan Walker kind of season out of him, which is perfectly acceptable, right? But I'm not expecting him to return to the days of 5 years ago when there was the hope he'd become a star. I don't see that happening.
Still waiting on signings with Bellinger, with Hader, Stroman, who we were talking about. So still some big names out there. Not a whole lot shaken. I haven't heard a thing with Josh Hader. Very little with Cody Bellinger. So we'll see what happens with those guys as we proceed. Should note, because we've talked about him before, Wander Franco, if you haven't been following that story, Ray, I think that the charges, I hate to say they're not severe because they are, but they're a little less is the expectation from the Dominican Republic. He's still facing some prison time. I guess the other news here is even if he's innocent, if he goes to court and nothing happens, I guess his future in baseball's pretty up in the air. And that's crazy to think about. I mean, Wander Franco was supposed to be, a star for 10 years. Tampa Bay is paying him like that, but there's a lot of assumptions being made that maybe his visa will be revoked and we may never see Wander Franco again in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, Ken Rosenthal did a write-up about this and mentioned the visa issue, and I guess there's a very real chance the United States won't let him back in the country. So if that's the case, obviously all of this is a moot point. I think that it does sound like, to your point, Kyle, that the charges may not be as serious, still extremely serious, but not as serious as original. But there hasn't been anything that's happened the last week to change the opinion that Wander Franco's played his last game of Major League Baseball. And, $180 million, face of a franchise, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's on life support, barely right now. And it does sound like jail time is a real possibility still.
And honestly, if he were, the whole visa thing and American, he's facing charges in another country. I don't know the legal system in the Dominican. We'll just have to see how long it takes. They've been investigating now for a number of months. He was charged. He's out on release now, but we'll just see how long the process takes. No idea. I don't know if they plea bargain stuff. Who knows how this will work out for Wander Franco. So we'll just have to see there. As is, you probably don't need to be drafting Wander Franco if you're in early drafts. Baseball guide, Ray, hopefully in the next 4 or 5 days, right? That's the plan?
I'm having a conversation today that I hope will clarify that, but that would be my intention, Kyle.
How about this? When it's official, people, we will let you know on
Very
Fantasy
quickly.
Sports Daily. You can rest assured of that. We'll tell you how you can get the greatest of Ray Flowers for 2024 and beyond. That'll do it for us today on Fantasy Sports Daily. Again, apologies on the microphone. Ray's going to be talking with people about getting the baseball guide up. I'm going to be throwing computers against the wall and trying to figure things out here. Hopefully tomorrow everything will be back to normal. So that is the plan. Ray, you have a good rest of your Wednesday, and we'll do it again tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern, okay?
Sounds like a plan, Kyle.
Ray Flowers there, Kyle Elfrink here. Thanks to all of the folks hanging out with us and viewing and listening to us on this Wednesday. We'll catch you on Thursday right here, Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by FantasyGuru.com.